Okay, hypermobility. Okay, hypermobility, where do we start? This is my baby, hypermobility. I could talk for days on hypermobility, so I'm just going to start talking and we're just going to go. This is probably going to be a series, and actually, this is probably going to go on forever. You're probably going to be able to tune in for the next 2 years, and I'll have videos on hypermobility. I myself am hypermobile. A little bit about my background. I do have a dance degree from Webster University. I got that dance degree in the 80s. Most dancers, as you know, are hypermobile. And so when someone comes into my office, I generally can tell pretty quick if they're hypermobile just by a lot of the symptoms that they have, believe it or not. I was super, super ecstatic when I found out that the majority of, not all, but the majority of hypermobile people have genetic presentation MTHFR with either one or two deviations, hetero or homozygous. And so when I found that out, I really started jumping up and down. Now, you don't need to know what that is right now. We're going to take each of these concepts, and each concept is eventually going to have a series on it. So skip over anything you don't understand for today, because we're going to go into depth with each of these. So this is just kind of your hypermobility introduction today. So keep that in mind. So if you get lost today, don't worry about it. Skip over it, because we're going to go into this in detail for a long, long time. When someone comes into my office and I feel they're hypermobile, the first thing I do is I get them grounded and I get their electrical system intact. So you need to check back on those videos and that content that I already did on grounding your electrical system, why that's important, because hypermobile people have got to be grounded no matter what, and their electrical system has to be intact no matter what. That's vital. If it is not, you're going to more than likely be susceptible to digestive issues. You're going to be susceptible to joint pain. You're going to be susceptible to migraines, headaches, autoimmune dysfunction, mast cell activation, inflammatory type of disorders. All of those type of presentations are going to find themselves going haywire because they have the opportunity to, because of your genetic disposition of MTHFR with one or two deviations, or SNPs, SNP''S. If you want to learn a little bit more about that, I recommend Dr. Ben Lynch's book, Dirty Genes. It kind of takes a complicated epigenetic information and presents it in a little bit more understandable format. So when someone comes into the office, and I suspect this, I do what I call the quick and dirty test. There is a physical test that can be done really quick. You can do this on yourself right now if you suspect you might be hypermobile, and I will show this to you on myself since I am myself hypermobile. So you can look for hyperextension at the elbow. This is basically an elbow that goes back the other direction. So you can see that my elbow, I'll hold it over the wall here. You can see that my elbow goes back the other direction. That's called hyperextension. Normal elbows stop about right here, but mine goes back the opposite direction. You can really see it in a lot of people when they put their arms up like this. It goes back the opposite direction, okay? So you have hyperextension there of the elbow. And the other place that I check it very quickly is the PIP and the DIP. So the PIP is the word for the proximal interphalangeal joint, and the distal interphalangeal joint is this joint here and this joint here. They will both hyperextend beyond straight. So that is what that looks like. I actually also have the next joint also goes back really far. So you can, I'm going to turn this way because it's a little easier to see in this direction. So they will go all the way back, very simply, very easy. I actually have that in all my fingers. So if you watch the Fascia 101 video, you'll see me rolling the little fascia between my fingers. And if you see, all my fingers actually curve upwards very easily because I have hypermobile there. The only joint I'm not hypermobile in is my knees, which is kind of unusual because most hypermobile people are also hyperextend at the knees, but that's the one joint in my body I do not hyper extend. Also, women can usually do this. Most men cannot do that. So actually, women, if you can do that, that's a number one self-defense item. I teach that self-defense. Men can't do that. So if you go to try to bend a man's thumb back like that, it's really good, quick getaway. They can't do that. So, but I have had hypermobile men come in who can get back about that far. So you know that they're hypermobile, because for a man to be able to get back that far is pretty astonishing. So that is the quick and dirty test, is what I call it, for hypermobility. So you can test yourself right now to see if you're hypermobile. That is the test that I do really quick when I have people on my table and I suspect they're hypermobile. Going on to the next factor that I find very important with hypermobile people. Hypermobile equates to hypersensitive. Hypersensitive equates to empathic. Hypermobile equates to what some people call psychic. It's not psychic, okay? So let's set the record straight. Hypermobile doesn't mean you're psychic. Psychic is not what people think. It just means super sensitive is what I like to call it. So if you take your 5 senses and just make them bigger, that's what a super sensitive is, all right? So for example, maybe the average person can hear a certain distance. Well, maybe a super sensitive not just hears a certain distance, but can hear everything in between, all right? Maybe the average person can see the certain distance. The super sensitive not only sees the distance, but sees every detail in between. All right, so super sensitive. Hypermobility equates with supersensitivity, no matter what. Now, I have been looking for scientific evidence of this for the longest time, because when I was a kid, I knew this about myself. Luckily, I had a mother who supported me. She said, "You were just born different, dear." And so she supported me along this path, and she didn't say, "No, you're making that up. Stop being that way." She is like, "No, something's definitely different about this one." So I was always like, yes, I'm different, but I want to know what makes me biologically different. What is it that makes me biologically different? So I spent my whole lifetime looking for those biological differences. And so being hyper flexible, I did not know that that tied in to being empathic or super sensitive. But now I've put all those pieces together, and the two are always connected, no matter what. And now I feel they're connected with this MTHFR with the 1 or 2 deviations or SNPs. And the more I learn about that, the more I learn about also, believe it or not, psychedelics and serotonin receptors. It seems there's also a connection there. For example, MTHFR with 1 or 2 deviations do not fare well with psychedelics. There is something they are not sure of why, but they don't know if they have more serotonin receptors, which so far the scientific evidence does not lean that way, or if they're more sensitive to the serotonin itself, which that's kind of more the way that the research is leaning, is that they actually have more sensitivity to serotonin. So the psychedelics actually fry their nervous system much quicker than the non-MTHFR with 1 or 2 deviations. So if you read the Dirty Genes books, genetic disposition, it does very well with psychedelic therapies. I'm not talking about just going out and psychedelic tripping because you have nothing better to do. I'm talking about psychedelic assisted therapy for trauma, COMT. The COMT genetic disposition does very well with psychedelic trauma therapies. So the MTHFR, not so well. And anyone who's MTHFR hypermobile, super sensitive usually will say, yeah, I tried that once and it went really bad, because that person is already genetically in that space. So they're already in that expanded awareness space that other people are trying to get into with the psychedelic. So they're actually already living in that space, whether they're aware of it or not. 80-90% of these people are aware that they're not even aware they're in that space, because no one's actually told them that. So what's happened is they're actually fried. Their nervous system is fried because no one knows what's going on with them. So they're the people who are out there who have high inflammation, they have mast cell activation and autoimmune disorders that the doctors can't help them anymore. They've been to every doctor out there, every neurologist out there, and they're really sick and they can't get anywhere. But they can't get anywhere because they're missing this piece. They're hypermobile, and they may actually already know their MTHFR with 1 or 2 deviations, but they don't know that they're a super sensitive and empathic. And they don't know how to balance that element, and the doctor can't tell them how to balance that element because that's out of their ballpark. That's not what they do. They don't know anything about those bioelectrics at all. They don't know how to balance bioelectrics of being empathic and super sensitive. They don't even know what that means. They're like, what does it even mean? But there actually is a lot of things you can do, physiologically and biologically speaking, that can balance that system out and completely improve your quality of life, and quite possibly even reverse your mast cell activation and your autoimmune response. So, and none of those things have to do with drugs. None of those things have to do with medical treatment at all. None of them have to do with medical treatment.